Is this working? That's working. Oh, gotcha. Okay, cool. All right. Lavaliers, other mics. I wasn't sure which way I was going. Here we are. All right. Welcome, everybody. I'm Marc Steiner. Good to have you all with us here for our Visionary Resilience Transforming Lives and Communities Conference for the day. It's going to be a really interesting day. And to start it all off, I want to introduce you to the new director of the AVAM Museum, Jenenne Whitfield, hot from Detroit and ready to roll. Jean.
Well, I want to say good evening or afternoon to everyone. And thank you. Look at this audience. Thank you for coming out on a Sunday and being with us. Normally I'm not scripted, but I'm wanting to say some very specific things. So forgive me if I drop down and look at my notes here for a minute. So the art of resilience. You know, there's no resilience unless you are actually plugged in and engaged. You have to get your hands muddy through life's hard lessons and experiences. Community engagement and resilience is not only hard work, it's dirty work, metaphorically speaking, okay? And when you survive, not if, but when you survive, you have a song to sing and a story to tell. And this is very near and dear to my heart. It's the work I came from in Detroit. And at this point, I want to share a few metaphysical principles that I hope will aid in how we think about the art of resiliency. And keep in mind, what we're talking about is getting up and getting back in the game better and stronger, okay? I want to think about a few principles. The first one is the washing machine principle. That's what I call it. And the washing machine, that process that it takes to get clothes clean is called agitate, okay? The next principle I want to talk about is called the light principle. In order to get light, we must have both a negative and a positive charge. Starting to feel my drift here, right? And then think about the diamond and what it causes for it to shine and sparkle. That's a beating and a buffing, okay? So that means that we're put here in life in order to be roughed up a little bit because it builds character and it makes us make things better. So those are just some principles that I like to think about when I'm confronted with something that wants to knock me down. Also, I want to say that it helps when we learn to let go of the day when we're doing our work by purging, you know what I'm saying? And it gets us ready for the next day. But you gotta learn how to let go. These are all principles. And when we practice, because anything that you want to get good at is going to take practice. But when we practice, we must learn to do it from a holistic perspective. And what that means is that your practice must be in thought. It must be then graduated to your word, and then it manifests in your deed. So we can't leave out all of the practice and just think we're doing the deed. We have to also do some thinking and some speaking that matches the work. That's my sermon. Just a bit of food for thought, right? Right. Now, I want to thank the Reveda Foundation and Dan and Gloria Logan for sponsoring our conference and making it possible to hold these amazing informational sessions for free, okay? That's very important. And of course, we also want to thank our media sponsor, WYPR. And again, I want to thank each and every one of you for being with us, and I'm sure we'll all leave more enlightened and inspired. So, at this time, I'd like to introduce our moderator and our host, who was already up here, but he said some things that were very dynamic, and I want to share that. So Marc is recognized as one of the most, well, I'll say he is a voice in Maryland who has gained national acclaim for his insightful style of interviewing. who is always open to featuring voices from all sides of the issues. But here's the thing that I really like. He says the truth lies in every corner. And I'll amen that. Ladies and gentlemen, let's give it back to Marc Steiner.
Thank you, Jenenne. Thank you. All right, good afternoon. Good to have you all here. And so this is going to be a conversation about resilience. And you're going to hear speakers who I'm about to introduce all of them to you now at once, and then they'll come up one by one to deliver 10 minutes apiece, a presentation, and then we'll have a group discussion. There'll be a short break, 5 minutes, and literally 5 minutes because we'll start without you. And then here we'll have a discussion in the panel and invite the audience to these two mics you see on either side of me to join in on that conversation, all right? And so the issue is resilience today, and it's resilience inside communities. It's resilience especially from inside communities that are marginalized and oppressed. It's resilience in the human spirit individually. And each one of these panelists represents that in a very different way. So that's what we're about to do today. And once again, I want to thank Jenenne for being the new AVAM director, which is just really important, and the Ravada Foundation, and Dan and Gloria Logan for being sponsors here, and WYPR. I know that name from someplace. I'm just kidding. It's a great station. It's an important station, and I'm glad they're part of this as well. I just have to throw that in a second. But anyway, so I want to introduce our panels and our panelists, and so you can know who they are and where they're coming from. Just bear with me one second. Hands aren't what they used to be. Used to be really easy to unfold paper when I was younger, but now they're getting harder. Here we go. All right. So we have on the panel Koli Tengella and Ashley Minner, the Reverend Heber Brown, who's here, Debbie Gross, and Dee Watkins. And we'll first hear from Koli, and let me tell you who these folks are. So Koli Tengella. He is a really important voice in the whole world of Pan-African progressive politics, education, entertainment, and culture. He's a writer, actor, teacher, was an Open Society fellow, and he performs what he calls himself a progressive comedian and a political pop culture commentator. And when I met Koli, he was 17. He's over there now. What are you doing over there, man? It's over here. So far away over there. Koli Tengella, and I met him when he was 17 when we had a family circle theater that when he was a student at Forest Park High School. And he has gray hair, and I don't know how I could have been my student. It doesn't make any sense whatsoever. But there he is, and he's carrying on that work in the schools that he works in as a therapeutic theater performing arts in our city schools. So Koli is with us. Koli, good to have you here. And I want to introduce our panelists as we go through them. The Reverend Dr. Heber Brown III is with us, and I've known Heber for a long time because of our radio show. He was pastor at Pleasant Hope Baptist Church that he built into this power church, really, with influencers and people from across the city who came to be part of that congregation. And he started this little farm there in the church, and that farm has exploded now. And he has gone on to become executive director and founder of the Black Church Food Security Network. So he took that garden and turned it into a dream of starting small farms on Black church-owned properties across the city, but also across the country, Tennessee, Georgia, North Carolina, Virginia, Ohio, and more. He's a dynamic thinker, speaker, and organizer, and I'm glad he's with us here today. And then there's Debbie Gross, who's sitting right here in front of me. And Debbie Gross is a professor at the Johns Hopkins School of Nursing. She's a nurse, a clinical scientist, the developer of the Chicago Parent Program. She did it in Chicago, brought it here. It's an evidence-based program co-created with parents to raise young children to strengthen skills and confidence. And she developed it in Chicago, but brought it here to Maryland, and now it's in 25 states, and she'll be presenting today as well. And we have also with us another man I've known for a while now, Dee Watkins, who's in the house. Dee Watkins is a renowned award-winning author, public speaker, writer, grew up in the city, on the corner, as we say, and became a New York Times best-selling author. His latest book, Black Boy Smile, A Memoir in Moments, added to the Beast Side, Cook Up, Where the Tomorrows Aren't Promised, and We Speak to Ourselves. And he has a master's degree from Hopkins, is an editor at large at Salon, and was a main writer on We Own This City, which is a series that was on TV that you saw on the HBO, and the HBO documentary Slow Hustle. Dee Watkins is with us. And last but not least, Ashley Minner is with us. Ashley Minner is a community-based visual artist from Baltimore. She's an enrolled member of the Lumbee Nation in North Carolina. She has an MFA in Community Arts from Maryland Institute College of Art, a Ph.D. in American Studies from the University of Maryland College Park. She's a museum curator, and she curates shows and she's not here in that capacity, but at the American Indian Museum in Washington, D.C. And she knows resilience because the Lumbee people are resilient people, which she'll talk about in length, whether they're in the mountains of North Carolina or on the east side of Baltimore. And so she is here with us as well. So we want to get this started. So everybody, we start today with, well, where is he? He's still over there, man. Come on. Koli Tengella.
How y'all doing? Hello, hello. Give it up for Marc Steiner, ladies and gentlemen. Every time I come up and I work with Marc, I always have this standard, this running joke. Marc is the only person on his time on the radio that has been regularly confused with a 1960s black radical nationalist. There were people who could not believe that Marc was white at all. I had arguments. You mean Marc Steiner? You know, I said, yeah. You know, he's a progressive white man working on being a good white ally. They said, what? Marc Steiner's not black? I said, I hate to break it. No. I said, no, he's not black, but he's a good ally. People have argued with me that up and down. No one believes that this man could possibly be white. But he always talking about institutionalized racism, white supremacy, inequity, fairness for LGBTQ plus people. How in the world can he be a white man? Okay, but he is. So give it up for Marc Steiner, ladies and gentlemen. Now, first of all, let's talk about resilience. Let's get right to it. Resilience is the ability to bounce back from tragic and hard situations. And we need to talk about resilience from the perspective of us as Baltimore City. So if you love Baltimore and you know that you are resilient and you want our town to be resilient, make some noise. That means we're going to have to deal with some hardcore conversations. Yeah, all right. If you know there's racism in Baltimore, clap. If you know that there's sexism in Baltimore, clap. Do you know that queer and gay folk are marginalized and disrespected? Clap. Women disrespected? Clap. Now, how can we make things better? Make things better. Now we're going. In order to do this, I did my research, Google, and I learned that we're going to go into something called neuroscience. That, remember people say to you, sticks and stones will break my bones, but names will never hurt me? They lied. Neuroscience says that sometimes things that are said to you can damage you more deeply than someone physically harming you. Now, how many people know friends right now? Name somebody you know that rather than them laying you out, you would rather for them to stab you or shoot you because their mouth is so foul. Come on, get up there. There's some people, and it's okay. They can be your parents that could say things to you to cut you to the quick that you would rather, you know what, Mom, Dad beat me. Catch a charge for child abuse, but stop telling me I'm not good enough and I disappointed you. So those are the things we got to deal with. So if you constantly hear that you're not good enough, your town is not good enough, you as a white person cannot possibly be sensitive to the needs of black folk, gay folk, poor people, and women, you're going to begin to believe it. But no, it's not true. It's all because we're exposed to that. And also, too, everybody want to talk about the children. The children. Young people need a better world. We need to focus on the children. The children. You better forget about that We grown folks need some help too. If you need a hug sometime, put your hand up. You a grown person. Somebody take me into a program and give me a snack too. Grown people, we need help because guess what? We make the world the way it is. We need a hug. We need, shoot, like, how many of you right now, grown people, little kids in pre-K, you know what they do? They get nap time. I am 60 years old. I need a nap. Kids get nap times. I need a nap. I need a break during the day. Good Lord. Look, I'm a 6'3", over 250-pound, dark complexion black man. I need a nap sometimes. It's hard going through life like this. What if you're an intelligent, brilliant woman in a sea of men who don't believe you're as intelligent? You need a nap sometimes to deal with that. If you're a gay, queer person, just trying to people to get to acknowledge your being, that it's all right for you to love who you love, but that doesn't take away from who you are. You need a nap sometimes. That's what we got to do, resilience, understand and look at things from other people's perspectives. And we got to work on our grown folk issues because grown people make little people who grow up to replace us. I want the next generation to be better than me. That's right. I want the world, I want you to be tolerant, patient, loving. Know there's another way to work out a problem other than shooting it or dropping a bomb on it. There's one of my favorite musicians. His name is Michael Franti. Everybody ever heard of Michael Franti? Has a song called "You Can Bomb the World to Pieces, but you can't bomb it into peace." That's what we need to do. Learn out, there's another way to work problems out. And also, listen to this. The government knows it's true too. What about how many people have ever looked at the people in California and out in the square states where there's always hurricanes and mudslides and fires and wonder, why don't them people move someplace else? They know every year your house gonna burn down or it's gonna get washed away, or the wind, the wicked witch of the east is gonna suck your house up and blow it away. Why don't you move someplace else? But the problem is, since you know it's coming, you should do what? Prepare for it. Build your house so it can survive a fire. Build your house so it can survive, convert like a transformer into a boathouse and float down through the flood. You know, you need to do that. The government knows that. We in a city that has young people killing each other, governmental systems with institutionalized racism oppressing people, sexist systems that are oppressing women, we need to design programs within it to prevent it. When you got a lot of people who use drugs to self-medicate to deal with their trauma, that tells you what you need. You don't need to lock them up. That ain't going to work. That just adds to the pain. You need to have a program that they can just walk up to and say, I got a problem. Can I come in to treatment? You need a place where a kid, let me tell you, whoever says that young people out on corners, and most likely you associate it with young black African kids, are lazy, don't want to do nothing. Do you know how any middle-aged white people stand up, think you can trap on a corner and sling drugs from 6 in the morning to like 11 at night and do the mathematical calculations that you can pay back what you owe to the person you got the drugs from and not die? That is work. You are not lazy. You are not dumb. What you need is options. So kid, let me tell you, I know one kid, I teach schools, and they tell me, you think I want to be out there trapping and selling drugs? You know what that can do? You know about the risk factors involved in that, Mr. Tengella? He said, I would rather have a job. But when you walk in, you can't fill out the application properly. But no, a drug dealer will trust you with several grams and ounces of illicit pharmaceuticals, trust you to calculate the amount being sold, the percentage of the money that has to be paid back and that you have to pay them. But, oh no, McDonald's don't want to trust you to calculate how many McNuggets and hot mustard sauces to give out. That's ridiculous. So we need something in line. To be resilient, we know we need jobs for young people. And let's forget about the adults who need naps. We need to know that there's a future after the age of 50. It's like you become 50 anywhere in this world, it's like, see ya, wouldn't want to be ya. No, you still have vibrancy and something that you can contribute. So let there be things where maybe older grown-ups can work with the younger folks on how to take that entrepreneurial spirit of being out on a corner and start their own business. Design things that we know we need. So that is what resilience is. Also, resilience is not a pass to say that it's okay for you as a human being to be smacked around like a piñata at somebody's birthday party. Resilience doesn't mean beat me, abuse me. I'll keep coming back like the Terminator. You want to get past resilience to thriving, to self-actualizing, to becoming the best us we can be. That's what we want to reach. And we only can do that by loving and nurturing each other, putting in things in place that uplift human beings. Because we're all the same, all want to be loved, respected, and treated well and have an opportunity to live decently. And we provide that for everybody. We're all going to be good. Now, right now, this is when you cue your mental Beyonce. Click. You can't break my soul. That's right. And then you got to bring it down to celebrating. Everybody hear Beyonce, you can't break my soul in your head. You hear it? You hear it? Even I know, white folks, I know Beyonce is like white Taylor Swift for you. So if you want to hear a Taylor Swift tune in your head as opposed to Beyonce, I'm not mad at you. So right now, you hear You Can't Break My Soul by Beyonce in there, and then you're going to hit this new dance. You may not have heard about it. Yeah, it's from my home part of the city, Park Heights. Yeah, it's a Park Heights strut. Oh, yeah, come on, clap your hands. Come on. All right, ooh, white people hitting on a beat. I'm scared of you. All right. You can't break my soul, and we are resilient, and we're moving from resilience to self-actualization, and we're thriving. Oh, yeah, and we're thriving. Oh, yeah, and we're thriving. Oh, yeah. Thank you so much. My name is Koli Tengella. It's been my pleasure. And now I want to bring back up the amazing Marc Steiner, ladies and gentlemen.
Thank you, brother.
Yeah, who is not black. Again, he is not black. He may sound like it on the radio.
All right, only for a day. Okay, now the next speaker is Dr. Debbie Gross. I think so. It's not us. You'll be fine. Yes, you can do that. That's fine. Oh. 1 second. I do this for a living. Can't even get it in. This is not good. Let's see. Boom. Wait.
Hey,
There.
thanks.
Sure, anytime.
Okay. Never follow a comedian. All right, hi. Thank you so much for inviting me here today. I'm a nurse, as Marc said, and I specialize in the mental health and well-being of young children. And I love being a nurse, and I care enormously about people, especially young people. But I learned early on that if you want to help children, as Koli said, you have to first help parents. Parents are the constant in children's lives. They are the change agents for their families. But you can't help children if their parents are struggling. And so while I'm a child mental health nurse, I am first and foremost a parent advocate. I'm also a researcher, and I've been studying parents and children for over 30 years. And I'm going to tell you some of the most important things I've learned about parenting. First, how many of you in here are parents? Okay, great. All right, so you'll appreciate this first thing that I learned. First slide, Gage. Thank you. Being a parent is the hardest job you will ever have. And there's no such thing as mastery attainment. Parenting defies mastery. Children are incredibly different within the same family. You got different personalities, you got different challenges, different strengths, different needs. And the thing that you tried with this child doesn't work with that child. And once you think you've got it all figured out, they change. So there's just not much preparation for becoming a parent. We're all sort of learning as we go along, and it reminds me of that saying by Irma Bombeck, parenting is the world's largest on-the-job training program, right? Okay, so how many of you in here had parents? Okay, trick question. Okay, great. Next slide. So then you'll appreciate this next lesson, which is being a parent is the most important job you'll ever have. You make a lot of money, fabulous. You do brain surgery, great. You got a gazillion people reporting to you, wonderful. None of it is more important than what you do as a parent. How's that for pressure? There's a lot of research on the many things linked to mental health problems in young children: poverty, unstable housing, violence, trauma, loss. But here's what the research also shows, that if you analyze the histories of children who've grown up under pretty harsh conditions and who appear to have come out okay, the one thing they all have in common is having had at least one consistent, supportive, and nurturing adult in their life. Someone who has been a stable influence, who made them feel special and safe and loved unconditionally. Now, usually it's a parent, but can also be a teacher, could be a pastor, be a grandparent, can be an older sibling. When I think of the greatest source of resilience a child can have, hands down, it's a caring, stable, and nurturing adult in their life. All right, so here's the third and maybe the most important lesson I've learned. Children come out the way they come out. You can't change who they are. Next slide. But we can change who we are as parents. The most important lesson I've learned as a nurse, a scientist, and as a parent myself is this: we cannot change them, but we can change us. Of all the things we know that affect children's mental health and well-being, most are extremely difficult, if not impossible, to change, but not parenting. We can change the way that we parent. In fact, parenting is probably going to be one of the most modifiable factors ever in children's life, highly modifiable. So I'm going to tell you a little bit about I'm going to give you one helpful piece of advice before you leave today. I'm part of a team that developed, as Marc said, a parenting program called the Chicago Parent Program. It's used in a lot of agencies across the country, not just in Chicago, but also in Baltimore City Public Schools. So a real shout out to city schools for investing in parents and in the Fund for Educational Excellence. Yes. And our community partners, the Fund for Educational Excellence. The theory underlying this program is something called the coercive family process model. Essentially what this model says is that parents and children inadvertently reinforce all the wrong behaviors in one another. How's that? We're all implicit. So parents give lots of attention to kids when they don't do as they're told, when they annoy us, when they whine, when they don't share with their siblings or fight with their siblings, and we say virtually nothing when they do what we've asked them to do, when they share, when they do something kind, when they manage something that's challenging, they work hard on something that's challenging. We say often very, very little. So we tend to do the exact opposite, but attention feeds behavior. So we need to feed the behavior. We value it in our children. By the way, this is much easier said than done, and I'm going to give you an example. When my son Ian was in middle school, every day he'd come home from school, dump his coat and his shoes and his books at the front door, and he'd hit the couch and turn on the TV. And every day I'd come home and from work, and I'd trip on his shoes, and I'd ask, "Did you do your homework?" And he'd say, "No." And I'd say, "Okay, turn off the TV and go do your homework." And he'd say, "Okay." Sound familiar? Okay. Come back 10 minutes later. Nothing has changed. I said, Ian, turn off the TV, get off the couch, and go do your homework. And, oh, okay, at the commercial. Okay. By the way, does this sound familiar to any of you? Okay. All right. So I go back, I start dinner, come back, 20 minutes later, nothing's. Now, okay, the parenting expert is losing it. Okay. Ian, get off that couch, turn off that TV, and go do your homework. And he says, okay. And he turns off the TV, and one day I said, Ian, why do I have to yell at you to do what I've asked you to do? And he said, catch this piece of insight, it's beautiful. Because when you yell, I know you mean it. And I thought, fabulous. I have trained my son to ignore me until I yell, and he's trained me to yell to get him to do what I've asked you to do. That's the family coercive process model, and it's going on all over the world. I'm sure there's some family doing this, doing it in Chinese, in another part of the world, but it is so universal. And by the way, he's 33 years old now, and he lived. But all I'm saying is it's a very common habit that we fall into. And by the way, we do the same things with our partners and with the people that we work with. We give a lot more attention to the things that we wish they wouldn't do and say very little when they do something kind or helpful. So you now know something important that has enormous power for building resilience in others. Think of the things that you really value in your children. I don't care how old they are, even if they're 50, or your partner, or the people that you work with every day. Then practice giving those behaviors more of your attention when you see them. You value a thoughtful child? Say something the next time you see them do something kind. You value hard work and perseverance? Say something the next time you see them do something and they're trying hard, even if they're not successful. They might be suspicious at first. This is a new behavior coming out of you. But you'll be impressed by the change in them and in you. Which brings me to my last lesson that I've learned. Next slide, last slide. Being a parent changes you. You realize how much you matter to somebody who really needs you. And you do. And that's awesome. Thank you.
That was really important. Really important. Next up is, yes, the Reverend Dr. Heber Brown III.
Good afternoon, everyone. Let's give Debbie another hand. Didn't she do great? She was so worried about following the comedian, now I'm worried about following you. I stand as a representative of the oldest black institution in the history of the United States, the Black Church. Since the late 1700s, black churches have been established. African American Christian congregations have been established in this country. Started in the African Methodist Episcopal denomination by Richard Allen and Absalom Jones and so many others who were tired of facing and confronting racism in white churches. And so one day they left out of that church and started their own congregation, which eventually became a whole denomination. At that same time, black-led Baptist churches were being established across the country as well. To go from the late 1700s to this present day and think about the impact of black churches, it might be difficult for some. Because the temptation in this country is to focus on individuals and not so much the power of communities. I'm a representative of a faith community. And in this faith community, so much has been given to this country and, in fact, the world. Here's an example. In January of this year, the third Monday of every year, we pause and we celebrate who? We lift him up as an individual. But I often think about the congregation that raised him. I think about his Sunday school teacher, who was his choir director. I think about the mothers of the church who planted some seeds in him when he was still Mike King and not even Martin yet. They helped to raise somebody who would go off and share his radiant, brilliant light with the world. What about Rosa Parks? Yeah. Also very faithful in growing up in the church. She was told about a man named Jesus who cared about the poor, who cared about those who were done wrong. And those lessons that she learned in the community of faith in which she grew up helped her to take a stand and organize and be a spark for something that we are still pausing to study and reflect upon. I could keep on going on, even to Beyonce, who also grew up in church, and like me and many others, got our start in learning how to stand confidently before crowds, not because of Toastmasters, but because of Sunday school programs and Easter play. And when you stumbled into poem or play, as I often did growing up in church, I remember even to this very moment, the mothers of the church who would say, "Take your time, baby, take your time." I'm just one part of a massive national community of faith that has planted seeds that goes beyond just reading the Bible or praying, but also a community of faith that has meant so much more to the African American community than just Sunday religious observance. For you see, black churches have been spaces where planning and organizing have happened. Black churches have been spaces where our wildest freedom dreams as a community have been safely shared without fear and without shame. Black churches have been spaces where the most radical actions of organizing and protesting have been planned, that's right, in the basement and parlors of black churches. Name whatever black organization involved in the black freedom struggle. Pick a name, pick a group, and many of those groups had connections. The Black Panthers, connections with the black church. The free breakfast program, oftentimes, it was in the black church where the Panthers were feeding the children. The Southern Christian Leadership Conference, easy, yes, the black church, and so many others. All of this history helped to shape something that really came to fruition through my experience serving as the pastor of the Pleasant Hope Baptist Church here in Baltimore. As a part of this community of faith, I started seeing members of our congregation suffer diet-related challenges over and over again. And listen, I'm a third-generation Baptist preacher, and I believe in the power of prayer. But there came a point where I got tired of just praying when I saw the people that I share life with get sick over and over again. But you know what really did it for me? It was when in my role as a pastor, I was officiating the funerals of members of the church, knowing some of the health challenges that perhaps shortened their days, and then would see that same health challenge jump on the next line in the same family. I wanted to do more. And so initially the thought was, let's partner up with some group and just get some fresh food in this church, some nutrient-rich produce in this church. But I went to the local store to begin thinking about a partnership along those lines. And when I looked at the price tags on the produce that was there, I said, we can't afford that. And it was frustrating because what we needed was right at our fingertips, but we just couldn't grab it. I remember still to this day leaving out from that store, walking back to the church. And when I got near the front door of the church, it was almost like I had an epiphany right there. It's like God tapped me on the shoulder and said, Heber, what's wrong? I said, God, you know what's wrong. What we need in terms of nutrient-rich food is right at our fingertips, and we can't get it. Economic barrier, cultural distinctions and differences, just can't get it. And I heard God say to me, Heber, look to your right. I was near the front door of the church building, a scene that I'd seen all the time, but in that moment, I said, okay, God. I looked to my right. First slide, and this is what I saw. And I walked past this scene thousands of times as the pastor of the church. Never thought nothing about it. The right side of that picture right there was privately owned by an elderly gentleman who was so tired of cutting his grass that he paid a dump truck to come dump rocks and stones all over the grass. The left side of that picture is owned by the church, and we would have things in it from time to time, but it had no ongoing use. I'd seen it so many times, I didn't even think about it. It's like the stop sign closest to your house. You don't read the sign anymore. Your brain knows what to do, and your body complies. But on that day, God helped me to see it again. Look at it again. And in that moment, with divine discontent bubbling up inside of me because I'm frustrated because we can't afford the nutrient-rich produce right across the street, with fresh eyes, with prophetic fire, I saw a garden. And the message was, listen, if we can't afford what they have, we will roll up our sleeves and grow it ourselves. I went into the congregation. I started sharing with the church, hey, y'all, I got a vision from God. And some of the members said, oh, here he goes again. I said, we can start a garden right here at our church in the front yard. Let's grow the food that we needed. Now, this sounds like a wild idea to so many. Churches don't do that. I said, I know, but I'm different. We're different. Let's do something. Some of the members got up off the pews and we joined together and we worked together to transform this picture into this. Next slide. We started growing food on this land. Kale and broccoli and greens, and tomatoes, corn. We even had some watermelon one year, and then started growing herbs as well. And what I realized was right in front of me in that congregation, there were more gifts than I'd ever seen before. There were many members of our church that had roots down south. Can I just see the hands of those who have family roots down south? Yep. I would imagine Virginia's in the house. North Carolina and South Carolina, Georgia is here. And what I realized was these people who were standing before me and sitting before me at this church all these years, their southern roots meant that many of them grew up on a farm or grew up in a more agrarian society and rhythm of life. And though they left the South, though they left the farm, it didn't leave them. And the garden was that thing that sparked them to utilize gifts that was always in them. It was just that the church was blind to the gifts that were in them that did not have something to do with the Sunday morning church service. If you know how to sing, the churches know what to do with you. Join the choir. Can you stand for about an hour? Okay, you're on the usher board. Can you make a mean pound cake? You better get on that kitchen ministry. But what do you do with the gifts that people have that don't fit neatly into our notions of what church is, quote unquote, supposed to be? This church garden transformed my understanding about what churches could be, about what faith-based organizations could be. It helped me to see that our churches have been anchor institutions for centuries, and we've done a disservice when we whittle it down to just what happens between 10 and 12 o'clock on a Sunday morning. I started sharing with friends. Valerie reminded me, and so many others. I started going around telling people, hey, y'all, this garden at the church is transforming the ministry. People are coming forward with different kinds of testimonies that I've never heard before. Like, I'm coming off prescription medication because the food that we're growing and eating at the church is helping me become healthier. People are saying things like, now that I've tasted real food straight from the garden, I'm not buying it from the store no more because it tastes so different. Some of y'all know exactly what I'm talking about. And then me personally, being a part of a family where many of my family struggle with high cholesterol and high blood pressure and all the other things, I started transitioning. I went from a pescatarian to a full-blown vegetarian. And as my diet changed as the pastor, it meant that the kitchen ministry had to make meals that fit the pastor. And then when the members saw what the pastor was eating and how good it was, more of the members started to say, well, I want what the pastor has. And our congregation got healthier. I became like a John the Baptist. And I started going around church to church and telling everybody, hey, y'all, there's something we can do with the land that we own that's better than just cutting the grass and making it look pretty. There's something we can do with the kitchens that we have and the classrooms and the vans that sits there Monday through Saturday being underutilized. That's got to be a sin somewhere in the Bible. That the blessings that God has given our faith-based organizations sits there. What if there was a greater purpose and use for it that goes beyond Sunday morning or Sabbath worship experiences? As the word spread that our church was growing food and that I was really undergoing my own transformation too, other churches came on board and said, hey, can you help us do that? Can you help us? Can you help us? And in 2015, in the midst of the Baltimore uprising, I named this thing the Black Church Food Security Network. It happened in the uprising because, as Marc and many of you know and remember, near the epicenter of where demonstrations and rallies were taking place, the corner stores was the only place for a lot of these communities to get the food that they needed. But during that time, the corner stores were put out of commission or closed down. Public transportation didn't run for a couple of days. Even the school system shut down for a few days, too. And y'all remember the curfew in Baltimore? There was a ripple effect of consequence. But our church was known as the food church. They knew we were the food growing, gardening, farming kind of church. So I called my farmer friends in the midst of the uprising as we got calls and we started moving food around the city, calling my farmer friends and my pastor friends and connecting the dots, being a people pollinator, bringing it all together. And the Black Church Food Security Network was born in the midst of that. Next slide. Now, we're around the country. It started as one church in Baltimore. Now listen, until I finish my book, people will only think about 2015 and think about bricks and fire and protests. But here's something that came out of the uprising. This network of churches, urban, rural, mega churches, storefronts, all denominations, and in fact, religious partners that run the gamut as well. Food is bringing us together. And not food charity, but rather food justice. Because the system, the food system, the corporate food system that we all are subject to, puts profits over people to the degree that it makes us literally sick. And until we create new systems that align with the best of what we believe about ourselves and each other, then we will continue to suffer. This is a picture of a system that's coming up church by church, farm by farm, partner by partner, and I want to invite you to connect with this work as well. Last slide. I always forget my business cards. So if any of this resonates with you, I'd love to connect with you. I truly believe that the work that we are doing when it comes to food justice, this is a major movement. It builds on the great work that a lot of churches do in the charity space, but we all know that charity only goes so far. At some point, we got to take some steps beyond it, and I humbly submit to you that the work that we're doing in the Black Church Food Security Network is in the tradition and in the spirit of the work of the Black freedom struggle, the civil rights movement. Because I close with this, some of y'all know Black Baptist preachers got at least 3 closes before we sit down. But I'm going to give y'all one because I want to hear these other dynamic speakers. So here's my one close. It's the words of a woman named Mrs. Fannie Lou Hamer. Amen. We can clap for Fannie Lou Hamer. Some of you know that it was Mrs. Fannie Lou Hamer who said, I'm sick and tired of being. That's Mrs. Fannie Lou Hamer. But it's not like she said those 9 words and then ascended into the clouds and left us. She said and did so much more. She was in the food justice space too. Remember, she was a farmer before she was a voting rights activist. Here's what she says, and I'll go to my seat. She said, food is used as a political weapon. But if you have a pig in your backyard and some vegetables in your garden, you can feed yourself and your family and nobody can push you around. I'm here today for the people who are tired of getting pushed around and who recognize that in your own way, you have some genius within you that can contribute to something that's bigger and that will far outlive all of us. Thank you.
Whew. All right. We have a lot to talk about today, and we just started. Now let me introduce, yes, Dr. Ashley Minner.
Good afternoon. Can you all hear me? I'm soft-spoken. Okay. Who knew there are American Indians in the city of Baltimore? Good. There are. Hi. Can we go to my first slide? Okay, so as Marc said when he first introduced me, I'm an enrolled member of the Lumbee tribe of North Carolina, and it may surprise you to know that the largest population of American Indians in the city of Baltimore is actually not indigenous to what is now known as Baltimore or Maryland. This is the ancestral homeland of the Piscataway and the Susquehannock peoples. The Piscataway are still alive and well, mostly in southern Maryland. I'm sure there are some Piscataway folks in Baltimore too. Rather, the largest population of American Indians in the city of Baltimore today are descended from folks who come from a very wide swath of territory. As far north as the James River in Virginia, and as far south as the Great Peabody in South Carolina. And fleeing disease and colonial warfare, they coalesced in a place that is known as Robeson County, North Carolina, prior to the establishment of the United States, and formed a cohesive group. And since 1956, officially, we have been known as the Lumbee tribe of North Carolina. So, Lumbee folks in North Carolina were dispossessed of their tribal homeland by and large through the southern agricultural system. Many of the things the speakers before me said resonated, so I feel like tying into all of them. But where we come from, our tribal homeland is still very rural and agricultural. When our people were dispossessed of that land, instead of just being farmers, they became sharecroppers. Y'all know what sharecropping is? People who lived through it, my mom's generation, her parents' generation will tell you it's very close to slavery. It's where your whole family works very hard on somebody else's farm for very little return. Makes it very hard for young people to make it through a school year. And lore holds, and it is true, that Lumbee soldiers coming back from World War II passed through major cities like Baltimore, Philadelphia, and Detroit, and figured out it would be much easier to make a living working in a factory than farming somebody else's tobacco in a tribal homeland where they were also second-class citizens, because in this part of the world, there was tri-racial segregation. 3 separate school systems. One for black kids, one for white kids, one for Indian kids. 3 sections in the movie theater, if you can imagine that. And so they started to move north in droves. Literally thousands of Lumbees settled in East Baltimore in the mid-20th century, such that there were so many of them in a neighborhood that bridges Washington Hill and Upper Fells Point, they started to refer to this area affectionately as their reservation. Y'all ever heard Baltimore City had an Indian reservation? Yeah, not an official designation. So, kind of at the heart of what was Baltimore's Indian Reservation still today is the Baltimore American Indian Center. And this is an archival shot of folks on the stoop at 113 South Broadway in the 1980s. I was born in 1983, by the way. My husband Thomas is here. He was born in 1986. We inherited, you might as well say, kind of the ruins of this reservation. Next slide, please. This is me working with some young people in, my own youth. I don't think I'm old yet. But some years ago, we had been working in a community garden that we tried to start in the backyard that day. Look at my dirty feet. So we decided we wanted to reconnect with our agricultural heritage. These kids don't know where food comes from. We have a little bit of land. We're going to start a garden. The experts were right across the street in the Native American Senior Citizens Center. Said, oh, can you teach us what you know about gardening? They're like, we came to Baltimore to get out of the field. You're crazy. So they all have gardens at home. They did help us. In our lifetime, my lifetime, Thomas's lifetime, these kids' lifetime, we always had the Baltimore American Indian Center. We always had the Indian Church up the street, South Broadway Baptist. That was the first organized effort of American Indian people in the city of Baltimore to have a community institution. We are pervasively Southern Baptist and Methodist, loud and common. And from the church grew the Indian Center. We also had that Native American Senior Citizen Center that was connected to our daycare. And we had some places that were just so infamous that they no longer exist, but they live on in story, like the Volcano Bar, which used to be at the corner of Ann and Fairmont, and it was so violent they said it erupted every weekend. So you can kind of point over there and say there used to be a bar. But if you go to that intersection, you won't see where a bar used to be. You can't even make it out. The building's not there. And I say we inherited the ruins of this reservation because by the time we were born, that's all that was left. I started to give a little walking tour of our community. Very short, start at the church, go to the Indian Center, hit the daycare / senior citizens building, one building, point over there to where a bar used to be, the end. Go have lunch at El Salvador restaurant. So one fateful day, I tried this tour, and along with us was an elder who had been a resident of the community when it was the reservation. And I said, well, Sister Linda, who was my Sunday school teacher, and we started at church, I said, why don't you lead the tour? Because you have much more institutional memory than me. This is your life. You tell the story. I'll just work on logistics. So she started at the church, and because she's a very enthusiastic member of the church and the Baltimore American Indian Center, she got so excited. She started inviting people to services. Not only was she telling about our history in the city, she was singing. People were coming from across the street to crash our tour. We spent like half an hour in front of the church, such that I started to worry we weren't going to make it to the other 3 stops. And I was like, Sister Linda, come on, we just need to get a block north to the Indian Center. Let's go. And she's like, okay, you're right, let's go. We didn't make it more than 10 feet. She stopped us in front of El Salvador restaurant where we were supposed to have lunch to say, don't you want to tell these people about the Indian store that used to be here? And I said, I'd love to. I didn't know there was one. And I couldn't tell them because it was gone a few years before I was born. And this got me to thinking, with anywhere from 2,000 to 7,000 Indians in this little neighborhood in Baltimore City, obviously we had more than a church and an Indian center and a daycare and a couple bars. How could I find out what used to be here? I will say that in my mom's youth, racial intermarriage in Lumbee Tribal Territory in North Carolina was not only illegal, it was societally unacceptable. If you wanted to be in a relationship with or have kids with someone who was not Lumbee or not American Indian, certainly, you pretty much had to move away, right? So when thousands of Lumbee Indians moved 400 miles north, they had kids with everybody. Everybody. My dad's white, Thomas's dad is black. Every ethnicity there is in East Baltimore, there's a Lumbee version of that. We have Greek Lumbees, Polish Lumbees, Ukrainian Lumbees, African-American Lumbees, Afro-Cuban Lumbees, go on and on, right? So when you are, as I am, racially ambiguous in the context of the United States, when somebody looks at you and they can't tell what you are, it bothers them. and they ask you funny questions like, what are you? Last time I checked, I'm a human. And imagine these kids, one generation later than me, we are truly multiracial, multi-ethnic community, and they get stupid questions a lot. So some of the most important work I did with them in my time here was walking around the neighborhood and reminding us that we belong here, that we have a right to be here, that we have history here, that we are walking in the footsteps of those who came before us, literally, because we're not reflected in the popular culture. Most people don't know American Indians are in the city of Baltimore. They expect us to look a certain way and talk a certain way. They don't know we drive cars, wear this kind of clothes, live in houses, probably are your coworkers. We look all kinds of ways. We have every texture hair, every color eye, every skin color, right? So it became very important to remind us that we have a history, a culture, and a right to be here. Next slide, please. And so, usually I show so many images when I talk about this, but the first thing I did was convene a group of my elders, and I said, could you please tell me what all used to be here? What were the businesses? Who lived here? What do you remember on the streets from when you were a young person, when this was still the reservation? And also, what happened? Like, why is it not like that now? And what we found, I found this 1969 map that was called the Lumbee Community in Baltimore. Shocker. Like, it exists. It was part of a federal study. And the whole entire top of the map is labeled Urban Renewal Area Vacant. So, as it turns out, almost every space that American Indian people owned or occupied in the mid-20th century in this part of the city has been so completely transformed, it's unrecognizable. What we've been able to hold on to is the Indian Center and the church. And they started to tell me their stories. They also, that map, by the way, the official federally commissioned map called the Lumbee Community in Baltimore, they were like, this is so wrong, we can't even fix it. They turned the paper over, and they started to make their own maps from memory, going street by street, alley by alley, block by block. And the volume of information on their map and the official map is so different. Their map is so full. And I said, well, they're telling me about all this stuff we had. How can I verify it? How can I see it? I go into the archives everywhere, and I wasn't expecting to find anything, because like we don't see ourselves. You don't learn about us in school, do you? No. The preeminent Lumbee scholar, Dr. Melinda Maynor Lowry, said, of course there are records of Lumbee Indians in Baltimore because they're people. They have social security numbers and addresses. Oh yeah, I know that. So I go in there and I find us everywhere. We're in the vertical files at the Pratt. We're in the periodical photo morgues. I'm finding pictures of our heroes. I'm snapping pictures. I found Thomas's grandma, for crying out loud, who I never met. The first folder I opened in one of the archives, is this your grandma? That's my grandma. Everybody's finding that they have relatives in these collections. They don't even know they're in there. So I start repatriating our images. And I start proving that all the places these elders are telling me existed really did. And we created some resources for the public. They're free and available to you and everybody else. The most in-depth one is baltimorereservation.com. This is the landing page. Through this website, you can see where we've mapped over 60 sites in the neighborhood. There's archival and contemporary photos and a bit of history on each. And then beyond that, there's the Guide to Indigenous Baltimore cell phone app for Android and Apple, free. That was developed in partnership with Dr. Elizabeth Rule, who is a Chickasaw citizen. And by the way, a whole team of us worked on these things. It's not just my art project or my scholarship. It's the elders, more than anything. I wanted this for them. And the medium that was most important to me to get out there, most important to them, is the paper Illustrated Guide to East Baltimore's Reservation, which there might still be a few laying back here somewhere. And on the back table, Valerie says, if you want to pick one up, the elders in particular are treating these as though they're precious. And that's exactly what I had hoped would happen. I'd say, hey, you're going to North Carolina, can you take this box of guides to the tribe? And my aunt will come back and say, well, we left some at the tribe. We saved some for our friends and some for our grandkids. I had a student up here for a tour of the reservation from University of North Carolina at Pembroke, our tribal college, who said, I've actually seen this before. My dad has one copy. It's all messed up, but he keeps it in plastic, and he asked me to please not lose it because he used to live in Baltimore, and can we walk to that address? And we did. So next slide, please. Beyond that, just a couple weeks ago, because those original resources focused on the built environment, we decided to add another dimension, and it's a photo exhibition just really highlighting those pictures from the archives called Safety in Numbers. And this was co-curated with two fellow members of the American Indian Community of Baltimore, Stanton Lewis and Tiffany Chavis. And we're just really proud of what we've been able to produce. And I think the most important thing that this adds is the fact that you can go look at us and see that we look every kind of way. We come from all walks of life. We're people too. We're here. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Ashley. That was great. And our final speaker before we have our discussion together, D. Watkins.
Never know what to do when I'm like, when you like the awkward like stage when one person is passing another person. It's like, do you go like this? Do you go like this? It's like, but can we give a round of applause for all of the speakers? They've been so amazing. They've been amazing, and I feel kind of sad because, you know, they were so inspiring, especially Reverend Brown, like so inspiring, and I'm just like wildly depressing. I told Marc I didn't want to go first because I didn't want to mess the assignment up, but I didn't want to go last because I don't really know how to end on a good note. Like I'm not end on a good note guy, you know? What I will say is I'm extremely resilient. Resiliency is currency in Baltimore. We don't have anything but how tough we are. We don't have anything but our names and our stories, right? And I don't want it. I don't want to be as resilient as I am. I don't want it. It's not something that I hold above my head like a trophy anymore. I don't want it. I got invited to all of these year-end celebrations last year because 2022 was a good year for me as an artist, and I didn't want to go to anything because one of my friends was kidnapped and murdered, and they put him in a car and set the car on fire. Like, so I'm sitting like at these dinners, you know, and people are talking about trophies and awards and books, and I'm like, I don't want to come across like a person that's not humble, that's not grateful, but it's like I just want to go home and watch, you know, Coco and Moana with my 3-year-old. You know what I mean? Like, I don't want to be a part of this stuff, but you know, it is what it is. I'm in my 40s now, and I'm from Baltimore City, which means you're in my age group. A lot of my friends are starting to come home from prison, right? It's a different kind of resiliency. So I'm getting all of the jail calls. Like, yo, so what's up with the phones? Like the only people who don't have iPhones are people who are just like, who want attention, right? Like the Android people want attention, right? You know, and they're like, do I need to buy the skinny jeans? The jeans skinny now? Like, should I, you know? And then my one friend who actually, he made it out, he came home, we're at this restaurant, and he's like, where's the bathroom? And I'm like, yo, it's right around the corner. It's like, but they all say non-binary. Which one is for me, right? So, you know, so, you know, but I'm getting these jail calls because people are coming home, but then I'm at this part of my life where I'm going to like premieres, red carpet events, and these are people with projects I'm working on and people with projects that are already completed. And when I come in front of, you know, when I get to a microphone like this, the same question I get from anybody who's even like a little teeny bit familiar with anything I've done. It's not even a question. It's more of a comment, right? You know, you had these events, and it's always like the guy in the back. I have more of a comment than a question. It's like, sit your ass down, But it's always like one of these people, these bloggers, these whatever writers, beat writers, these people who cover these red carpet things. They always stick the microphone in my face and they say, "Wow, you came from nowhere. You came out of nowhere. You came out of nowhere," as if overnight success doesn't take 20 years, right? But when I think about that, and just thinking about you all, and thinking about today, to be an artist and to come from a place like Baltimore, the world sees you as a person who came from nowhere. You are from nowhere. You are from a place that we don't think about, we don't care about, we don't want to pour into. So it's all fine and good when you actually get the trophy, when you get to make the show, when you publish the book, when you get, I don't know, like, I never sat on Oprah's couch, but I got a hug from Gayle King before, which is pretty solid. It's pretty, like, you're right there. But they don't really think about us, and so it's good when you get a chance to be able to have that success. But then when you think about how you got there, and you think about how difficult it was, and you think about that resiliency, it comes back to the whole idea of, do you want that? My whole writing career started by mistake. It's almost a mistake. I'll tell you what happened. Promise I'm not going to hold you up. It's a wild mistake. So, I'm skipping past, when I fell in love with words and all of that stuff. Like, I'm skipping past that. I'm going right to publishing, right? I'm going to I'm going for the juggler. Hey, Lane. I'm going for the juggler, right? So, there's this writer, one of my favorite writers to this day, Kaise Lehman, he wrote a book called Heavy. It's really, really a brilliant memoir. He's a brilliant guy. He was an editor at this magazine. I'm slipping on the title. He was at Gawker. He was an editor at Gawker. And after it took me about maybe 750 query letters to find a literary agent, and it took that literary agent 2.5 years of rejection because nobody wanted a book from a guy writing about growing up in East Baltimore who was still living in East Baltimore. To quote one editor at one major publication I won't name, he's probably going to die before his book comes out, right? So this is my agent. She's from Minnesota, so she never even heard anything like that. She's like, I need a cocktail. Like it was heavy for her, right? For me, it's the resiliency piece. Like, it took me 750 emails to find you. You think I'm gonna let one editor who's saying one negative thing about me, you think that's gonna make me stop? Like, it's not. I'll drop him as quick as I drop you. But if you don't want to take this ride. So she said, nobody's trying to buy your book. Nobody's into the resilient story. Nobody's into the, I did the wrong thing. I realized the error of my way. It's popular now. Like, now it's popular. Now it's all you see on the bookshelf, right? But at this particular time, it was like, nobody wanted that story, right? They wanted, shout out to West. They wanted you to go to the Army and, like, do like some of the amazing stuff that my good brother Westmore did. I was kind of a bad guy. So they weren't into that at that particular time, and she was struggling with the book. So she said, "Won't you publish an essay?" And since Kaise was one of my favorite writers, I sent it to him, and he thought the essay was really, really good. He said he can't wait to publish it. He said, "You're gonna be a star," and then Gawker folded, right? Gawker folded. Gawker folded because of a scandal between Peter Thiel, who founded PayPal, and Hulk Hogan. Like, look it up. It's random how they had an impact on my life. But I then went to salon.com, and the essay was about me playing spades, drinking cheap liquor with some friends, which is also a wild story because everybody mentioned in that essay is dead. So that's another part. But it's an essay about me drinking cheap liquor and playing spades with some friends, right? And the editor at Salon read the essay, and she said, "This is amazing. It's no way I don't know you. Like, who are you? Who do you know?" And I'm like, "Lady, I'm trying to get in. I don't know anybody, right?" And she published the essay. The essay did well, and I ended up getting a book deal and all of these different things. Now, what I found out years later is the woman who actually published the essay was in Alcoholics Anonymous because she got blackout drunk. But she loved drinking alcohol. Like, she loved alcohol. Like one of them people who just wakes up in the morning, cracks open a bottle of Hennessy, and just sniffs it. You know, it's Tuesday. You know what I mean? And because she, you know, and she loved to have it, to go to like a cocktail lounge, to go, you know, the social part of drinking, to sit in a little circle and, you know, oh, but did you ever mix this with that? Like, she was a real big alcohol person, but she couldn't drink alcohol anymore because she just kept blacking out. Her book is actually called Blackout. It's really good. And what made her read my essay and like my essay is that the only way she got a chance to hear about funny stories around alcohol or funny stories or nightmare stories or bad stories was through the essay she published. So her publishing me was kind of like a mistake, because if she was still getting drunk, I never would have been able to get that essay, right? And then it's the same kind of story attached to my first book deal. That agent was able to sell that book, but it took years. And the way I always explain it when I'm talking to new writers, when I'm talking to people who are still trying to figure out the industry, when I'm telling people about some of the things it took for me to, you know, kind of move forward a little bit, it's always kind of the similar story of how long you can wait, how long are people gonna, you know, tell you no, how many no's can you take, how you're gonna be perceived in the industry, and how it's not in your control. And if you can deal with that, then you can do it. Now, I have an advantage because I come from a very dangerous place. So you telling me that my essay is bad is kind of not a bad day. You know what I mean? Like, a bad day is police officer putting his foot in your ass. That's a bad day. Bad day is not, you know, like my writing. So I was able to wait it out and work a bunch of odd jobs and, you know, do a bunch of free stuff and, you know, like go to a bunch of events and try to network and connect and meet people. So I was able to wait it out. Everyone can't afford to wait it out. That's the other part of that resiliency piece. Like, some people can't even afford to chase their dream because of how our society, how the current setup is. It doesn't really work like that. So, you know, when I sit here and I think about the theme of the event and everything we're talking about, the one thing that comes to my mind is success to me is having the ability to elevate my most non-talented friends, right? To put them kind of like what Trump did for his son, I'm not trashing my industry, and I'm not, you know, I'm making a little joke, but I truly mean, like, for me to be able to get a book deal, to sell a television show, and the things that I'm lucky enough to be able to do, it shouldn't take everything that it took, the hours, the free work, the rejections, the hate, the stuff that happens, how other people feel like, you know, when it doesn't really happen for them the way it happens for you, all of the negative things that comes around making it as a black artist. I don't want that. I want it. We should be able to spend time with craft and develop and make and grow and have experiences and connect with other people and be able to grow. We shouldn't have to go through hell and back 30 times to accomplish simple things. Like, I have another friend, similar background. You know, she wanted to be a nurse, but it took, for everything she had to go through, she didn't get to just wake up and be like, oh, I'm gonna go to college 2 years, I'm gonna be the 2-year nurse, and then I'm just gonna go get the 4-year degree. Like, she literally had the weight of the world on her shoulders her whole entire life. So that 2-year to 4-year story to get into that profession was like a 15, 20-year thing for her. and it shouldn't be like that. It doesn't have to be like that. It could be better. My story should not be a miracle story. I should be another square person who fell in love with writing and tried to piece together some books, piece together some television shows, and then shoot my shot. And, maybe I'll get some rejection. Maybe somebody will like it and pick it up, but I don't have to, go through everything I went through in these industries just to be able to have a little bit of success. I think it can be better. I think resiliency is amazing, and I champion it, and I love it, and I'm thankful to be resilient. But if I do my job, my daughter won't have to be. Thank you.
Okay, so I have a little change up here. We're going to move some chairs around and get this place set up for our discussion. And want you all to participate in that discussion. And the mics on either side here. We're going to take a short break, 5 minutes, no more. I'm going to start it in 5 minutes. The bathrooms are back there. Lavatories are back there if you need to run there. Take a stretch, and we're going to start our conversation together. So, ready? Here we go. And you can hold on to that for a minute. We got 2 mics, and we just share them. All right, folks, everybody grab their seats. Let's get the show on the road, because we're going to be out, get you all out of here by 4:15. So you're going to have a little bit of daylight left. Folks, can we all take our seats now in the back? Can everybody kind of sit and get settled here? We're going to start. Now, so there's a mic here, and there's a mic there. So to participate, we want you to walk up to the mic. Folks, please sit down now and have the conversations later, because it's really getting late, okay? Ma'am? Just so there's my. So we want, if you do want to get to the mic, line up across that way, where like on the sides, and we want you to be part of this conversation as well. And we have 2 mics up here, and we're going to start. Here we go. This has been. I thought these were amazing presentations. Amazing presentations. So let's just begin here. I mean, I think there's so much been set up here, and it's, I'd like to begin, since we're living here in this city, and we're all part of this city, to talk about, for a moment, from your perspectives and what you've said and what you've heard the other panelists saying. How do you inculcate a resilience to build a new city? How do you take what you've been doing, from the stories that come out of the corner, from the power of survival in the Lumbee Nation, from the gardens being created, from the work with families? How do we, in some ways, almost institutionalize it to begin to make a city that's resilient for the next generations to really take hold? How do you think that happens from your work and your life? Who wants to start? Looks like Dee wants to begin. You can begin, Dee.
So I think for me, it's all about how we empower the next generation of people who want to be in our profession. So like, these are like my little brothers and sisters right here, Kandwani Fidel, Nathan Corbett, and Cash. And Cash is a designer, and Nathan's an actor, he makes music. A lot of people know Kandwani Fidel is the voice of the Orioles now. When you go to the game, they play his poem. But how are we sharing resources? How are we having tough conversations? Like, look, this is how you get an agent. This is how you agent your agent. This is how you take, this is what this contract should look like. This is what you should be doing for the next group of people when you have an event, to make sure that we are steadily building our community of writers and creators and artists and people who want to work in these industries. So while I think, what Reverend Brown is doing is amazing, that's one part. What I do is another part. Like, the stuff you've done for me over the years, Marc, is a different part. So it's always like it's every person who's able to accomplish something or do something, sharing those resources and those ideas with other people, and then pushing and putting that pressure on those people to do the same, if they're blessed and lucky enough to be able to figure it out.
Nicole, you have a mic there. Say something.
First of all, hello, everybody. How you doing? Thank you for hanging tough with us, and appreciate your love and your energy. Just like Dee has shared, I believe that we just have to save our city by creating an ecosystem of mutual respect and love. I believe that we need to force ourselves to interact with one another. That I was born and raised in Lower Park Heights. It should not have taken me to be a performer, teacher, actor, to actually be invited to a home of someone in Roland Park or Federal Hill or Canton, which took several years. We need to understand that we are all interconnected and we all have value, and not a voyeuristic value like, ooh, I've got this once from a poor community black person who's doing impressive white stuff to come over my home. And also have an Afghan dog and a Turkish rug. You know, not that way. And like, ooh, look at my enormous diverse things. That there are blueprints on how to do it. There's an amazing gentleman named Strickland. I forget where he's from. I think it's up north in Massachusetts, who created communities. We can begin to do that and mutually, financially support one another by doing it. And some of it has to be by us taking the trust walk of spending money and going over or meeting in a neutral space and place to connect and view each other as human beings and not as other human beings.
She's double-mic'd woman. Go ahead. You want Heber.
I'll say quickly, just staying in the lane of where I've been planted. When I think about how do we make this like a thing, when I think about black churches, and I really want to talk about church in this minute from a socio-political standpoint. The religious stuff is very important, but from a socio-political standpoint, this is an institution that has already withstood centuries worth of assaults and harassment, from arson, burning down black churches, to the lynching of our pastors, to the assassination of our children in Sunday school. By the very nature of what this institution has meant for black people in this country, it is resilient. And for those who are reared and raised and groomed in that kind of space, you can't help but to have a fingerprint of resiliency on you as you grow. When you talk about systematizing it, I also, from a socio-political standpoint, the church is an institution. And the reason why I planted the seed of our work in the bosom of a black church is because it existed long before I was here. And long after my individual life is over on this side, that institution will continue on. And because it has shown the ability to withstand and overcome racism, white supremacy, it has proven to have the sustainable muscles to be adaptive, to be curious, to be flexible when needed. And again, I want to be clear, I'm not trying to paint a panacea of the church. Churches have many issues. Black church has many issues and challenges. So it's not a perfect place. But in terms of having black-led systems that have groomed generations of black people around a particular worldview and orientation, it has produced that, and I trust that it will continue to do that. And so if you're talking about how do we have more resilient people, a part of me wants to say go to church. Now, because in the shadow of empire, black people have created the kind of fictive relationships, connection, history, song, culture making that has been the sustainable fuel to keep us going for a very long time.
I think people by default are oriented toward the past or toward the future. You probably know what kind of person you are, and generally as a society we have a really hard time being present right now. I know me, I like the past. I'm a historian. I like old music. I like old fashion. I like old TV shows when I watch TV, old books, all of that. And I'm the kind of person who, the neighborhood I study is continuously in transition, right? It's being gentrified right now, redeveloped luxury apartments popping up everywhere. Urban renewal doesn't end. So in a way, I see like these historic facades that can't be touched. You know, you get a big fine from CHAP if you do that. with luxury apartments behind them popping up, like Perkins Public Housing was recently demolished. Supposedly mixed income housing is to follow, but we who have been around for a while know kind of what to expect. It's too close to the water. When I see that happening, I'm like, oh, they should have just left it dilapidated. They should have just left the lot. I like the old building better than the new shiny thing that I'll never be able to touch or access, right? Also, I started working in my community as a young person. I spent years getting beat up trying to be the Indian education coordinator in Baltimore City Public Schools, like 12 years. That was one of my first grown-up jobs. Volunteering at the Indian Center, going to the Indian church, and then I got tired, and I was like, you know what resilient people have is historical trauma. So it's hard sometimes to be in our spaces too. And then we became parents 8 months ago yesterday. Thanks. And all of a sudden, I'm thinking about the future a lot. Like, what kind of life will our daughter have? What can she expect? How will she know who she is if we don't take her, if we don't make something for her? So I'm just there. I just wanted to say that I'm there trying to think about it and figure it out now.
Debbie? Pardon me.
So everything everybody has said is perfect. And the only thing I'm going to add is one more thing. We have to build in and honor social connection. That the thing that destroys communities and people more than anything is the isolation of feeling alone. And COVID taught us that. And so whatever we do, the health and all things policy has to build in opportunities for social connection and building social capital across people.
So, and folks, please, if you want to participate, grab a mic. What? Can't hear me? Oh. Can you hear me? I feel like should be like, the police. Can you hear me? You got him? You got him. There we go. Good. So I'd like to kind of think about what all of you have said and this concept of resilience. And just for a moment to think about if you all had the power, I mean, beyond the power that you have, to deal with the question of resilience in our city, and how you change that. When we have this food security network, right? And thinking about what that in a much larger scale could change in terms of people's lives, right? Not just in everybody in the world cannot be an artist. We all got to eat. So, and we also look at our neighborhoods. You talk about gentrification. And I think about that. We wonder, why do we have a homelessness in Baltimore? Because people don't have homes to live in. That's why we don't have homeless in Baltimore. That's part of the reason. So how do you take that concept of resilience and expand it and transform a place like Baltimore? Where do we start? Who wants to start? Heber, you want to start?
Sure. I think, how do we expand it? So I talk about scale in a couple of different ways with our organization. When I first started this work, it was about scaling out. But the more that we scale out, I recognize how important it is to scale deep. So instead of trying to focus on, we have 5,000 churches now, scaling deep might look like me sitting with Ashley a little bit more, because now I'm so curious about a chapter in Baltimore history that I was never introduced to. Yes. Let's scale deep, because you represent, and this is just an example I could do with anyone here, but you represent a whole universe that I am so curious about now. And you put up some flares that feel very familiar. And so when I think about how you are like a part of this universe, that I'm like, ooh, this is exciting, I want to learn more. And then I would imagine I may have shared some things from my experience that said, and then I see like two distinct universes coming together, and then recognizing, wait, there's a lot here that overlaps and that connects. And perhaps that kind of scaling deep, Marc, will never come from City Hall. Maybe it never comes from the usual suspects of those even behind the politicians that keep Baltimore moving a certain kind of way. So maybe it could be a creative way of resistance to, for me, it would be looking at the natural gathering places. And so as much as individuals have some room and work and opportunity to connect and hear from each other from an individual standpoint, I think about the natural gathering places that help make that kind of thing possible. You know, I'm not going to talk about the church anymore. Well, not for this question. But but when I think about all the other natural gathering places, like the store that you told us about that was no longer there. That was a space and a place. There are places where what used to be off of Broadway, it's no longer there, but there was places where older African-American men would sit together under a tree and talk. So it doesn't have to be places with a website and like a sign out front, but wherever people are gathering and sharing in some type of connection socially, there's an opportunity to say, hey, what is happening here that's drawing us to this space and land? Like the gardens do. Gardens have powerful energy when it comes to that, many of you know. But I think those other kinds of spaces are there as well. And it might take, I call myself a people pollinator. It might take some more people pollinators who can appreciate and have a curiosity for what is distinct and maybe different from their own walk and their own lane. But instead of shunning it or judging it, they lean into it. And what if what if we can mimic and model what happens in nature and be the bees, the pollinators that kind of just drop a little pollen here, a little pollen there, and allow something fresh and beautiful to sprout as a result.
I like that, pollinator. I like that a lot. He kept calling your name out, Ashley, so go ahead.
I'm still thinking about it.
All right, let's go to the audience. Is someone that's waiting at the mic? Let's get folks up here.
I'm very nervous about making this comment, but this is for Mr. Watkins, D. Watkins. You sound a little bit like you have survivor's remorse. And I just want to say, I don't want you to have survivor's remorse. You don't want to have gotten where you are because of the things that you had to deal with or the things that you saw. But when you were talking, you reminded me of a conversation I've had with my husband in the past, how when you're walking and everything is concrete and everything is paved, it doesn't matter how long that's been that way. When you look down in the crack in between there, there's always a sprout. And so instead of you not wanting to be where you are because of what you had to go through to get there, maybe consider yourself a sprout and proof that there's nothing that can make life stop. It doesn't matter. I don't mean that it doesn't matter, but the things that you've gone through and the people that you've lost, the people who are going to be lost, anything, any force that is there to try and stop life, you are proof that it cannot be done. And so I just kind of wanted to give you a hug. Not a physical one, but that's how I felt when I was listening to you. That was it. Okay.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you for that. And I feel like what I was trying to say, and I may have not been as clear as I could have been, was I feel like it shouldn't have to be this hard. And I think that's what I was trying to say in so many words, is that I wish, I hope and pray that there'll be a group of people who don't have to sit in the newsroom and anytime a black person's death go viral, everybody just look at you. You know what I mean? Like, or if I can walk, into a publishing place and, write a book about, I don't have a dog, but if I wrote a book about like how much I love my dog, you know what I'm saying? Like, they're like, nah, we want automatic weapons and flipped over houses. You know what I mean? So I feel like that, but thank you for your kind words.
Let's hope we can one day not talk about that at all, because it's just unnatural. It's unnatural. Ma'am, go ahead.
Hi, everybody. I thank you very much for all your comments and sharing that you did. This reminds me of my birthday in 2017, I think. I attended a Antigone play at Coppin State. I don't know if anybody else was there, but it was a really, really powerful evening. And I think that to go forward, you have to create platforms, primarily in art, through art, to continue this conversation. So that's all I can say for right now. I got to go.
Well, thank you. That's good. Somebody want to pick up? Debbie, you want to pick up on that? Koli, go ahead.
Yeah, in terms of the use of art as a tool to create engagement and change, it is wonderful. But I want to add on to something that was mentioned earlier. Marc was sharing about homelessness, violence. We just have to do a paradigm shift. Value human beings more than things. Switch the paradigm saying you are of no value unless you can pay for a home. You deserve a home to be given to you. It doesn't have to be opulent, simply because you're a human being, and human beings deserve a home. If you are struggling with a drug use issue, that doesn't make you a broken human being. You wouldn't put someone out in the street or ostracize them for having cancer. Look at you, you got cancer. Pull yourself together and don't have cancer no more. You would never do that. So, but we treat people who struggle with addiction that way. Switch the paradigm. Because you're a human being, you deserve to be treated like a human being. You deserve a basic income to live. I know this is unpopular stuff, but a drone just got taken down, was worth $32 million. $32 million. How many people could live off that drone for at least 10 to 15 years decently on the cost of one drone? We should value human beings more than things.
Thank you, Koli. Debbie, go ahead.
I do think we've learned that in this country during COVID, we cut poverty rates, children poverty rates in half during COVID. We absolutely did, and we also cut homelessness. And so the country, we know how to do it. It is a priority about how much we want to invest in safety nets. So I just want to say, it's not about not knowing. It's about how do you reprioritize.
Ashley, want to say something? That's one of Mike's stuff.
I went back to school to be a better artist because I'm a visual artist. That's how I always identify as an artist.
And you're a Ph.D.
And I'm a Ph.D. because I went back to school to be a better artist. Why? Because I was making so much art about being Lumbee from Baltimore. People kept asking me to talk and write about being Lumbee from Baltimore, and I felt like I needed a degree beyond my lived experience to do us justice, which is kind of silly, but it worked out. And sometimes I'm Dr. Ashley Minner Jones. So, thanks. It was hard. As an artist, I always knew and know there are other possibilities. It doesn't have to be this way. In American Studies, in my program, they teach you about settler colonialism and that it doesn't end, and that racism doesn't end, and that none of these systems of oppression can really be undone, and we're all part of the system, and it just perpetuates. Like, you can't end it. And I want to say that art and artists are the only way out. Our superpower is that we're able to be visionary. And when we're not in a state of having to be resilient constantly, we don't have to be in a reactive state. We can envision other possibilities. We know another world, another life is possible. We can draw our way out of this or write our way out of this. So that's also why I always identify as an artist first and try to remember who I am in every situation, whatever title they give me or in whatever capacity I'm supposed to be sharing in there. Through my lines, through the resilience that's in me, I know there's another way. I know a way out of this, and I know I can get to it.
Yeah, we're going to go here, and then we're going to go here, okay?
Hi, thanks for sharing your gifts. I have a sort of simple question. If you have some comments about the concept of hope and wishful thinking, maybe more on the street level of where real people are coming from, you know, the importance of hope.
Who would like to begin that? Debbie, go ahead.
Hope is everything. And hope is church. Hope is children. People have children because it's hope. Because you see a future, you see the opportunity to make a better future. Hope is friends, family. It's everywhere. We just have to look for it and nurture it, value it. But it's really important.
Yeah, definitely understanding the things that are going well for you, the hope that's inside of you, and helping other people see the things that are working, you know, for them too, so that they can have hope as well. You know, a lot of times, you know, not to be corny, but we you know, glass half empty, half full kind of thing. We don't realize how many great things we have working for us, and I know like a lot of entrepreneurs, you know, we go through difficult times, and sometimes all we have is hope. You know, the banks only give money to people who don't need it, right? So sometimes all we have is hope, and community and family and friends are great places to build on that. So yeah, I think, you know, I feel like after listening, I don't know what you want to. Okay, yeah, I think after listening to everyone on stage, I think we all expressed hope, and we show that we're hopeful in many different ways.
So I'm going to go back to the audience here, but I do want to just follow up with the question and what you just said. And Heber, let me jump to you because you ran a place called Pleasant Hope, right? So I wanted to respond to that as well as how you breathe hope into the despair that so many feel in so many communities in our city. How do we breathe hope into that? And you, everybody on this panel is a creative person. Everyone on this panel is a creative person. How do you build the hope? What do we do? And you said outside, not just institutionalize it in the government, but how do you build hope?
Thinking about moments when I don't feel so hopeful. Your question is making me go to places where that heaviness was on me, not feeling hopeful, not feeling good enough, not feeling worthy. And one of the things that I learned in the early period of the pandemic, I learned about grounding techniques. And some of you are familiar when it comes to managing anxiety. Grounding techniques can help bring you back. And sometimes it's focusing on one thing you can see, focus on something you can smell, something you can touch, something you can hear. And what I learned through doing that myself and sharing it with others is that it's a way to bring me back to the present moment. You talked about being present. Because sometimes that hopelessness or despair is tethered to our worst and my worst imaginings about what could happen, what might happen, what they may find out, what they might, all these possibilities. And sometimes, I don't know if anybody else's brain in here is kind of like mine, but sometimes it can imagine the worst, even when the present reality is suggesting otherwise. And so being called back to the present moment is very powerful for me when the waves of despair start crashing against my reality. And can I just say, too, I think speaking more openly about the reality of hopelessness and despair could be helpful. That maybe when we all realize that in various ways we all wrestle with anxiety, and despair and hopelessness that we all have wrestled, not just long time ago, but maybe just as recently as this morning, but the feeling of not living up to the fullness of what you think or what others think you might become. It's a trip trying to be human. It's a wild ride just trying to be human.
Amen to that.
And what I pray for all of us is that we create safe spaces like the one, Marc, that you're guiding us to with this question. Safe spaces to say, you know what? Sometimes I get it right and sometimes I fall on my face. But me just being here in this room is evidence that hope got me up off the floor, because I never would have walked into the room unless I believed that there was a possibility that something more and better could come just by being in the room. As cold as it is in here, it's warm in other ways, and something special is kindling in our midst just by trying to be more human.
You can see why the congregants at his church love the Reverend Doctor over here. So let's go. Where did I go? It's we have like 10, 15. Here, this side. You're.
I work here at AVAM as a docent, a volunteer docent, and I would like to throw some seed for thought that maybe the Reverend and other people can plant. We are here talking about resilience, and a lot of people have talked about art. And this museum started because our founder believed art could help heal. If you look at our walls on the museum, they're by students who were arrested for nonviolent drug offenses, and we tried to have art change their path. And we have facts now that it happened. So I would like us to suggest here in Baltimore, we have lots of things that we could do, particularly with homelessness and drugs, and it could come out of the art community. We have lots of vacant houses. You know, we talk about homelessness, but we have a lot of vacant houses, and I know she's gonna kill me, so I'm gonna run out of here after I say this. But our founder, Jenenne, our new director, Jenenne, her husband recreated houses by taking vacant houses and turning them into art forms and places where people can live. And my hope is that AVAM can help you plant art gardens where people can live around Baltimore. And I think art gardens next to food gardens could really give resilience, because if people work together to fix those houses, that gives them hope and that gives resilience. So there you go.
Since we do want to be out of here by 4:15, not take us too far, let's go to the mics and we conclude with our panel. So once you come next, and then you. Go ahead.
Hey, yeah, first, I wanted to say something that you said, Dee, that really connected with me was the whole, I don't want this resilience, right? I don't need it to represent, or I don't need to have that experience in order for me to feel like I excel. But I find myself usually observing that those who have incredible resilience, who of course comes with struggle, are the ones that are most wanting to help those around them who need help. What does any single person who has experienced this resilience owe to their community? What do they owe to their friends? You know, all of you individually have done so much, and it was a calling for you, but do you owe it to any of us to give us these resources and to give us a platform? You know, how can we make people there's actually a lot of people in this room who can make a much bigger difference for my community than I can make. And I'm the one who's most willing and most wanting, but I also have so many friends who is slowing them down. They are in the neighborhood, they're in the communities, trying to do work for the community, but at the same time, they're not moving forward because that cycle of wanting to help your community can also hold you back sometimes. What does any single person owe to their community?
I'm going to get the last comment here from the audience, and then you all can just go down the row and respond, okay? Just so we can get out of here when we said we would. Ma'am, please.
Hi, I just want to say that it would be nice if we had a place to go, or at least maybe twice a year, 3 times a year, where we could connect with people who have connections. I grew up in the Poe Home Projects, right at Lexington Market, Emeron's Bakery, Schreiber's, Lexington Market, and my resilience came from my mom. She said, we're getting out of the projects, and she borrowed $25 from her girlfriend's grandmother to move us up on Garrison Boulevard. At that time, it was mainly white, and I said to myself as a little girl coming from the projects, what are we doing here? But my mom never gave up. So that's where my resilience came from. But I think if we had a place to come to where we know, well, maybe we can get a connection from the food security. Maybe we can get a word of mentorship from the writer. Maybe we could get some mentorship from the lady about parenting. I have 2 kids, and that's why my hair is dyed a different color. I couldn't do the gray. So, and then being a comedian and also trying to handle stress and anxiety, how do we go about that? How do we find individuals to help us? But if we had one place to go, like here, it would be certainly a nice place to get the resilience that we need. And that's let it go from that.
So let's do this. We only have no time. But what we're going to do is quickly run down the panel to respond. Final thoughts from all of you in short order. So let's start and work our way down. Koli, go first, and we'll just work our way down.
What do we owe people that we grew up with in our communities? This is just me personally. We owe them to create real, tangible change that they can feel and touch, and not just hyperbole in language. Create policy that they can build on, that is real and tangible, a human space and place to create, and also learn how to take their skills and monetize them so that they can live in this current capitalist structured company. That's what we owe and should give to them.
Debbie Gross.
Okay, well, this is going to sound funny coming from a nurse. I don't think we owe anybody anything. I think that what we owe ourselves is finding something that's meaningful, something that gives our life meaning. And for many of us, it is doing something for others. But not because you owe it, but because it comes from an internal source of goodness and gratitude and meaningfulness that you're here for a reason. But that's my 2 cents on that one. And the other thing I just wanted to say about the other comment is, I like the idea about centralizing something at the museum, but I really think that the way we need to be going is building more resilience in all of the different places where people are. Stop seeing schools as places just for education. They are centers for families. They become community centers. If we just stop siloing all of our organizations, I think every one of these organizations have the potential for building resilience among the communities around them, so we can have more place-based support.
D. Watkins.
Thank you. Wait. Okay. Oh, bet. So thank you for the comment. It's a very, very tough question, and I'm just going to answer it in the most honest way possible. It goes down to who you are as a person. I owe the people who come from, I owe my community because I know the horror stories that I lived and what I've been through. I know their kids. I know what their families go through, and I know what they need. So Giving away over 10,000 books has cost me. Doing over 500 schools and jail visits has cost me. The mentorships, the late nights, the phone conversations, the money I gave away, but it's something that I felt like I had to do. Has nothing to do with what any of my peers do. It's something that I feel like my pathway to becoming an artist has not been a traditional one. I came through the back door, and I know what that is. So has it hurt me? Yes, but I feel like it's something that I have to do, but I would never put that on another person. And at the end of the day, it's going to be one of them questions you're going to have to ask yourself when you look in the mirror. Like, did I do what I was supposed to do from the people who come from where I come from, or did I make a couple of dollars and just disappear? And both of those people could sleep well at night. It just depends on who you are and what you want to take on. So while I do that, I never, ever, ever put that on anybody else. Like, I don't put that on nobody. Like, I would never be like, yo, I've been through way more. I visited way more jails than you. I get way more. Like, I would never do that. I literally I don't even tell people what I do. I just do what I do, and I just, like, mind my business. But if you ask me, I'm like, yo, it's heavy. It's a lot. If the average person has, like, a 50-hour work week, mine is, like, maybe 100. You know what I'm saying? But I don't complain. I'm just thankful that I get to do it.
Heber Brown.
They've spoken so richly about the questions already. I just want to take a moment to show appreciation and thank our staff and team who's here from the Black Church Food Security Network. Thank y'all for being here. On a Sunday afternoon, they're out helping to make sure there's merchandise and stuff available. Can I just say a plug for black farmers real quick? For the past 100 years, black farmers, their land has been taken, they've been harassed, they've been cheated at markets. Our organization exists in part to support local growers and local farmers. We won't have a more just food system until we make decisions, whether your household or whether your synagogue or your group or your church really thinks very seriously about how you put money in the hands of who to feed yourself and your family. And so we have shirts over there that say support black farmers. I don't care that you're not black. We all have to support black farmers. We have to support local farmers and local growers. There were white members of the Southern Christian Leadership Conference. There were white members of SNCC. There were white members. Abraham Heschel marched alongside King and so many others. So when people ask me questions like, well, it's so black, your name, your organization's Black Church, black this, black that. Can I be a part of it? There have been non-black people a part of every chapter of the Black freedom struggle, and I want you to see yourselves as a part of not just supporting an organization. I did not leave my church to just lead a nonprofit. I left because it's an urgency, climate change and wars and racial injustice and police brutality and food inequality. And it's my all-in moment, and I'm inviting and asking you to join in with the Black Church Food Security Network, and let's do an all-in moment together so that our grandchildren and our great-great-grandchildren will not have to climb the kinds of mountains or face the kind of challenges that we are hearing about and feeling today. So thank you so very much.
When I think about what I owe, I think about my ancestors and my teachers and my mentors. So in the audience today, we have Dr. Elaine F., former Baltimore City folklorist, one of the co-founders of Maryland Traditions, the person who taught me to record oral histories when I was a little Ashley at Micah, who said, this is your work to do. You have to get it done. When I wanted to do anything else because I was already tired at the ripe old age of 30 or whatever it was. So I'm getting that done. Soon there will be a book more permanent than a website and a pamphlet and a phone app to point and say, hey, we are people of this city. We contribute to what it is. We're still here. Beyond that, I think of Dr. Joyce J. Scott, who is a treasure from Baltimore, in Baltimore to this day, internationally renowned, amazing artist who mentors both myself and Dee and probably more people in this room because she pays it forward. And she also comes from parents who were sharecroppers in North Carolina who wanted a better life. And she says she is all that she is because they went through what they went through so she can have that opportunity. And as an artist, she says we have one job in life, one responsibility, and that is to make art. And I want our daughter to have the best mom she possibly can have and a fulfilled parent. So I'm going to get that book done, and I'm going to make some art.
So I want to thank the panel. I think it's been an incredibly interesting panel and discussion. Thank you all for coming out today. I want to thank once again the Ravada Foundation and Dan and Gloria Logan and WYPR, the media sponsor, for being part of this today. And let you all know that on the way out the door, you can take a brief survey, letting us know what you thought. The QR codes are posted on the hall. You can find an AVAM staff member and a clipboard, and just leave your thoughts on the way out. And thank you all for coming out here today and being part of the panel. And we really have to stop. Pardon?
It's very pro-Baltimore, and it addresses something that one of the questions was. There's an organization in the city called the Baltimore Office of Promotion and Arts. They have grants for artists, screenwriters, writers. They have studio space for artists, writers, etc. It's an organization, founded by the city, and I highly recommend.
All right, thank you very much. Thank you, really. And on the way out, you can stop by there and help support the Black Food Network right there. All right, thank you all for coming out tonight. Thank you. Sure.